The morning sun cast long shadows across the Atlanta airport as Maya adjusted her maternity blazer for the third time. At 7 months pregnant, even her loosest business clothes felt tight, but she needed to look professional for the conference waiting in Los Angeles. This wasn't just any conference either. She was giving the opening keynote speech to 300 marketing executives, something she'd worked toward for years. Maya pulled her boarding pass from her purse and double-checked the seat number, first class, seat 2A. She'd splurged on the upgrade because the 3-hour flight would be brutal on her back otherwise. Her doctor had cleared her to fly, but sitting in cramped economy seats wasn't something her spine could handle right now. The gate area buzzed with the usual airport energy. Business travelers typed furiously on laptops while families wrangled children and oversized carry-ons. Maya found a quiet corner and called her husband David to let him know she was about to board. "How are you feeling?" David's voice carried that gentle concern he'd developed since her pregnancy began. "Like I'm smuggling a basketball." Maya laughed, rubbing her belly. "But good. Nervous about the speech, but good. You're going to kill it out there. Just remember to take breaks and stay hydrated." "Yes, doctor," Maya teased. David wasn't actually a doctor, but he'd been reading pregnancy books like it was his job. The boarding announcement crackled through the speakers, calling for first-class passengers. Maya gathered her things and made her way to the line, her hand instinctively supporting her lower back. The flight attendant checking boarding passes looked to be in her 30s, blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, name tag reading Rebecca. She took Maya's pass and studied it longer than necessary, glancing up at Maya's face, then back at the pass. "Is this your seat?" Rebecca asked, her tone carrying an edge that made Maya's stomach tighten. "Yes," Tushy, Maya replied, keeping her voice pleasant. Rebecca looked at the pass again, then at Maya. "And you purchased this ticket yourself?" Maya blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I'm sorry? Did you purchase this first-class ticket, or was it upgraded by someone else?" Heat crept up Maya's neck, but she maintained her composure. She'd dealt with this kind of thing before, unfortunately. "I purchased it myself, yes." Rebecca held on to the boarding pass a moment longer than necessary, before finally tearing off the stub and handing it back. Okay, go ahead." Maya walked down the jet bridge, her mind racing. She tried to shake off the interaction, telling herself she might be reading too much into it. Pregnancy hormones could make everything feel more intense, right? But as she settled into her seat, she couldn't ignore the feeling that this flight was going to be different from what she'd hoped. The first-class cabin was about half full, mostly business travelers in suits scrolling through phones. Maya pulled out her own phone and reviewed her speech notes one more time. She'd practiced this presentation dozens of times, but the nerves still fluttered in her chest. Rebecca moved through the cabin, greeting passengers and helping with carry-on bags. She was all smiles with the man across the aisle, asking about his business trip and recommending the lunch options. When she reached the elderly couple behind Maya, she chatted warmly about their vacation plans. Then she got to Maya. "Can I see your boarding pass again?" Rebecca asked, no warmth in her voice. Maya looked up from her phone, confused. "I already showed it to you at the gate. I need to verify the seat assignment. Sometimes the system makes errors." Maya felt every eye in the cabin turn toward them. The businessman across the aisle lowered his newspaper, watching with raised eyebrows. She fumbled in her purse for the boarding pass, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Rebecca examined the pass like she was studying evidence at a crime scene. She even held it up to the light, checking for something Maya couldn't understand. "This seems to be correct," Rebecca said finally, as if surprised by this fact. "Of course it's correct," Maya said quietly, trying not to make a scene. Rebecca moved on without another word, but Maya noticed she didn't ask to see anyone else's boarding pass again. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Maya tried to focus on her speech. She'd worked in marketing for 8 years, climbing from an entry-level position to senior director at one of Atlanta's most respected firms. This keynote was recognition of her expertise and hard work. She wouldn't let one person's attitude ruin what should be a career highlight, but Rebecca wasn't done. During the safety demonstration, when Rebecca walked through the cabin checking seatbelts, she stopped at Maya's seat and tugged on the belt with unnecessary force. "You need to make sure this is tight enough," Rebecca said loudly. "The baby's safety depends on it." Maya's face burned. The comment wasn't technically inappropriate, But the way Rebecca said it loud enough for everyone to hear felt deliberately embarrassing, like she was calling attention to Maya's pregnancy as if it were somehow problematic. "It's fine. Thank you," Maya replied, her voice tight. The gentleman across the aisle, a distinguished man in his 50s, frowned at the interaction. The elderly woman behind Maya actually leaned forward. "Excuse me," the woman said to Rebecca. "Is there some kind of problem?" Rebecca's customer service smile snapped into place. "No problem at all, ma'am. Just making sure everyone's comfortable and safe." But her eyes stayed cold when they looked at Maya. Once they were airborne, Rebecca began the beverage service. She wheeled the cart through first class, taking orders and chatting pleasantly with each passenger. Maya watched her laugh at the businessman's joke and compliment the elderly woman's earrings. When Rebecca reached Maya's row, the warm demeanor disappeared. "What would you like to drink?" Rebecca asked, not making eye contact. "Could I have some orange juice, please? And maybe some water?" Rebecca poured a small cup of orange juice, filling it only halfway. She set it down on Maya's tray table with just enough force to make the liquid slosh. "Water?" Maya asked when Rebecca didn't offer any. "You'll have to wait. I need to serve the other passengers first." Maya watched Rebecca give the man across the aisle a full glass of apple juice and a bottle of water without him even asking. The couple behind her received 2 drinks each and a small bag of mixed nuts. When Rebecca finally returned with Maya's water 20 minutes later, it was in a small plastic cup, the kind they usually gave to economy passengers. "Is there anything else?" Rebecca asked, her tone suggesting there better not be. Maya's back was starting to ache from sitting upright for so long. She'd been looking forward to asking for an extra pillow, something first-class passengers requested all the time. But after Rebecca's behavior, the simple request felt loaded with potential for more embarrassment. Still, the pain was getting worse and she had hours left to go. "Could I possibly get an extra pillow?" Maya asked as politely as she could. "For my back." Rebecca's expression suggested Maya had asked for something completely unreasonable. "I'll have to check with the senior flight attendant," Rebecca said. "We have limited supplies." Maya glanced around the cabin. She could see at least 3 extra pillows in the overhead compartments where they stored blankets and amenities. But she just nodded. "Thank you. I'd appreciate that." Rebecca walked away, and Maya heard her talking to another flight attendant near the galley. Their conversation was too quiet to hear, but Maya caught Rebecca gesturing in her direction more than once. The other flight attendant, an older woman with kind eyes, looked over at Maya with what seemed like sympathy. She said something to Rebecca that made the younger woman's jaw tighten. A few minutes later, the senior flight attendant brought Maya not just 1 pillow, but 2, along with an extra blanket. "Here you go, honey," she said warmly. "How are you feeling? When are you due?" "October," Maya replied, grateful for the kindness. "Thank you so much for this, of course. Long flights are tough when you're expecting. Let me know if you need anything else." As the senior flight attendant walked away, Maya caught Rebecca watching from the galley, her expression unreadable but definitely not pleased. Maya settled back with the pillows, trying to find a comfortable position. Around her, the other first-class passengers had returned to their books, phones, and quiet conversations. The awkward tension from earlier seemed to have faded for everyone except Maya, who couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. She closed her eyes and tried to focus on her breathing, a technique her yoga instructor had taught her for managing stress during pregnancy. In a few hours, she'd be in Los Angeles preparing for the biggest speech of her career. She wouldn't let one person's inexplicable hostility derail what should be a triumph. But as the plane cruised toward the West Coast, Maya couldn't help wondering what she'd done to earn Rebecca's obvious dislike. More concerning, she wondered what else might be coming before this flight was over. Maya had just started to relax when she heard the meal cart rolling down the aisle. The lunch service in first class was always pleasant, usually featuring real plates and multiple course options. She'd been looking forward to it, especially since her morning sickness had finally subsided and her appetite had returned with a vengeance. Rebecca approached with the cart, wearing that same strained smile she'd been using all flight. The businessman across the aisle was finishing up what looked like a delicious chicken dish, and the elderly couple behind Maya were enjoying what appeared to be salmon with vegetables. "Lunch?" Rebecca asked when she reached Maya's row, though her tone made it sound more like a question about whether Maya actually belonged there. "Yes, please. What are the options?" "We have chicken or salmon. Rebecca replied curtly. The salmon sounds wonderful. Rebecca reached into the cart, but instead of pulling out a meal, she paused and looked at Maya suspiciously. Can I see your ID? Rebecca asked suddenly. Maya blinked, confused. My ID, why? We need to verify that you are who you say you are. Security purposes. Maya looked around the cabin. Nobody else had been asked for ID during meal service. The businessman across the aisle had lowered his newspaper again, his eyebrows raised in obvious surprise. I don't understand, Maya said, keeping her voice calm despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. You already checked my boarding pass twice. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to cooperate with airline security procedures, Rebecca said, her voice getting louder. Several other passengers turned to look. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her purse. She was a frequent flyer and had never encountered anything like this, but she also knew that causing a scene on an airplane could lead to serious problems, especially for someone who looked like her. She handed over her driver's license, and Rebecca studied it like she was a bouncer at an exclusive club. She compared the photo to Maya's face multiple times, even tilting the license to catch the light. Maya Johnson, Rebecca read aloud, as if announcing it to the entire cabin. Atlanta, Georgia. That's me, Maya said quietly, extending her hand for the license back. But Rebecca wasn't done. She pulled out her phone and appeared to be typing something, glancing between Maya's ID and the screen. Is there a problem? Asked the elderly woman behind Maya, her voice sharp with disapproval. This is highly unusual. Just following protocol, ma'am, Rebecca replied without looking at the woman, still focused on Maya's ID. The businessman across the aisle cleared his throat. I've flown first class hundreds of times, and I've never seen anyone asked for ID during meal service. Rebecca's jaw tightened. Sir, I'm handling a security situation. Please let me do my job. Security situation? Maya asked, her voice cracking slightly. What security situation? Rebecca finally handed the ID back, but she didn't move to serve Maya's meal. Instead, she stepped back and crossed her arms. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stand up. Maya's heart started pounding. Excuse me? Stand up, please. I need to conduct a standard security check. A what? The elderly woman behind Maya was getting more agitated. Young lady, what on earth are you talking about? Maya looked around the cabin. Every passenger in first class was now watching the interaction. Some had pulled out phones, and she realized with horror that people might be recording this. I don't understand what's happening, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. I just want to eat my lunch. Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, I'll have to call the captain, Rebecca threatened. Maya's mind raced. She was 7 months pregnant, exhausted and completely confused about what was happening. But she also knew that airline crew had broad authority, and resistance could make things much worse. Slowly, Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. The movement sent a sharp pain through her lower back, and she had to grab the seat to steady herself. Are you seriously about to search a pregnant woman? The businessman asked, standing up himself now. This is completely inappropriate. Sir, please take your seat, Rebecca snapped. I will not, he replied firmly. This is discrimination, plain and simple. And I won't sit here and watch it happen. Rebecca's face flushed red, but she turned back to Maya. I need to check for any unauthorized items. Unauthorized items? Maya repeated, her voice getting higher. Like what? Please put your arms out to your sides. Maya stood there 7 months pregnant, arms outstretched in the aisle of a first-class cabin while other passengers stared in shock. She felt tears threatening to spill over but fought them back. She wouldn't give Rebecca the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Rebecca began patting Maya down, starting with her arms. The touch was rough, more aggressive than any airport security check Maya had ever experienced. When Rebecca reached Maya's sides, she pressed hard enough to make Maya wince. Ow, Maya said softly. Please be gentle. I'm being thorough, Rebecca replied coldly. When Rebecca moved to Maya's back, pressing and squeezing like she was looking for hidden weapons, the elderly woman behind them stood up. That is enough, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being heard. I am Dorothy Patterson, and I am a retired federal judge. What you are doing is harassment, and I am witnessing every second of it. Rebecca's hands paused on Maya's back. Ma'am, please stay out of this. Absolutely not, Dorothy replied. This young woman is clearly pregnant and has done nothing wrong. You have provided no reasonable explanation for this treatment, and I have never seen anything so unprofessional in 50 years of flying." Other passengers began speaking up. The businessman was recording everything on his phone, narrating what he was seeing. A woman in the back row called out that she was a lawyer, and this appeared to be discrimination. Even a teenager traveling alone said this wasn't right. Rebecca was now surrounded by hostile first-class passengers, but instead of backing down, she seemed to double down on her behavior. "I am the authority on this aircraft," Rebecca announced loudly. "If you interfere with my duties, you can be arrested when we land." She continued the pat-down, now focusing on Maya's belly area. Maya gasped when Rebecca pressed against her stomach, causing the baby to kick in response. "The baby," Maya whispered, instinctively putting her hands over her stomach. "Ma'am, I need you to keep your hands at your sides," Rebecca ordered. "She's protecting her child," Dorothy said, now standing directly beside them. "This has gone far enough. I demand to speak to the captain immediately." "The captain is busy flying the plane," Rebecca snapped. "Then get the senior flight attendant," the businessman demanded. "Get someone with actual authority before this goes any further." Rebecca looked around the cabin at the sea of angry faces. For the first time since the ordeal began, she seemed to realize that she had lost the room completely. Every single passenger was against her. "Fine," she said, "but this woman stays put until we figure this out." She walked toward the galley, leaving Maya standing in the aisle, shaking and trying to process what had just happened. Dorothy immediately moved to support her. "Honey, sit down," Dorothy said gently, helping Maya back into her seat. "That was completely unacceptable." "I don't understand what I did wrong," Maya whispered, finally letting the tears fall. "I was just sitting here." "You did nothing wrong," the businessman said firmly, taking the seat across the aisle to face her. "I'm Richard Chen, and I'm a corporate lawyer. I've never seen anything like that in 20 years of business travel." Dorothy sat on the armrest of Maya's seat, something that would normally be against airline rules, but nobody seemed to care about rules at this point. "What's your name, dear?" Dorothy asked. Maya Johnson." "Well, Maya, I want you to know that what just happened was not normal, not acceptable, and not legal. That flight attendant has no authority to conduct random searches of passengers, and certainly not in the manner she just did." Richard nodded in agreement. "I recorded the entire thing. This is clear harassment and possibly discrimination. You have grounds for a serious complaint, maybe even a lawsuit." Maya wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "I just wanted to get to Los Angeles for a conference. I'm giving a speech tomorrow morning." "What kind of speech?" Dorothy asked kindly. "Marketing, koi?" "Ference, I'm the keynote speaker." Maya's voice was getting stronger as she talked about her work. "It's about innovative digital strategies for reaching diverse consumer markets." Dorothy and Richard exchanged a meaningful look. Here was a successful professional being treated like a criminal for no apparent reason. "Maya," Richard said carefully, "I have to ask, have you experienced anything like this before?" Maya nodded sadly. "Not exactly like this, but yes. Sometimes people see me in first class or business class and they assume I don't belong there. Usually it's just looks or small comments, never anything this extreme." "This isn't your fault," Dorothy said firmly. "And it's not something you should have to accept or expect." From the galley, they could hear voices rising in what sounded like a heated discussion. Rebecca appeared to be arguing with someone, though they couldn't make out the words. "What do you think they're saying?" Maya asked. "I hope someone with sense is explaining to her how badly she just messed up," Richard replied. "Because if that senior flight attendant has any brains at all, she's probably calling the company's legal department right now." The other passengers in first class had formed an informal support network around Maya. The teenager had offered her water, another woman had given her tissues, and several people had exchanged contact information to serve as witnesses. Maya looked around at these strangers who had stood up for her and felt a mix of gratitude and sadness. She was grateful for their support, but heartbroken that she'd needed it in the first place. The discussion from the galley was getting louder, and Maya could now make out Rebecca's voice saying something about following procedures and suspicious behavior. Another voice, older and calmer, was responding with words like, "Completely inappropriate and immediate report." "Sounds like someone's getting a reality check," Dorothy murmured. Maya closed her eyes and took deep breaths, trying to calm down for the baby's sake. In a few hours, she'd be on the ground in Los Angeles. She'd give her speech, she'd fly home, and hopefully she'd never have to think about Rebecca again. But somehow, she had a feeling this story was far from over. The senior flight attendant who emerged from the galley looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. Patricia Williams was a 25-year veteran of the airline, and Maya could see from her expression that she was both mortified and furious about what had happened. "Ms. Johnson," Patricia said as she approached, her voice gentle but professional, "I am so deeply sorry for what you've experienced today. I'm Patricia, the senior flight attendant, and I want you to know that what happened here is absolutely not representative of our airline's values or training." Maya looked up at her, still shaken but trying to maintain her composure. "Thank you. I just don't understand why it happened at all." Patricia glanced back toward the galley where Rebecca stood, looking defiant despite clearly having been reprimanded. "I don't have a good explanation for you, and that's part of the problem. What occurred here violated every protocol we have for passenger treatment." Dorothy, who had remained protectively close to Maya, spoke up. "That young woman conducted what amounted to an illegal search of a pregnant passenger with no justification whatsoever. In my 30 years as a federal judge, I've seen clear cases of harassment, and this was textbook." "I understand completely, Your Honor," Patricia replied, recognizing Dorothy's authority immediately. "We'll be filing a full incident report, and there will be immediate consequences for the crew member involved." Richard leaned forward from his seat across the aisle. "Ms. Johnson, I really think you should document everything that happened while it's still fresh in your memory. Times exactly what was said, who witnessed what. This kind of treatment is unacceptable." Maya nodded slowly. She pulled out her phone and opened the Notes app, her hands still trembling slightly. As she began typing, the details came flooding back. The multiple requests for her boarding pass, the unnecessary ID check, the way Rebecca had announced her name to the cabin, and then the humiliating pat-down that served no security purpose whatsoever. "Rebecca Morrison," Maya said quietly as she typed. "That was her name tag." "I saw the whole thing," said the teenager from a few rows back. He was maybe 17, tall and lanky with kind eyes. "I've got younger sisters, and if anyone treated them like that, my mom would lose her mind. That wasn't right." Dorothy pulled a business card from her purse and handed it to Maya. "Dear, I know you don't know me from anyone, but I want you to have my contact information. If you need a witness to what happened here today, I'll be happy to provide a statement." Other passengers began offering similar support. Richard gave her his business card and his personal cell phone number. The woman from the back row, who turned out to be a civil rights attorney named Lisa Chang, also offered her contact information and some preliminary legal advice. "The key thing," Lisa explained, "is that airline crew have authority to ensure flight safety, but they don't have unlimited power to harass passengers. What happened to you crossed every line we have." As Maya continued documenting the incident, she found herself feeling stronger rather than weaker. Yes, the experience had been horrible and humiliating, but seeing how many strangers were willing to stand up for her reminded her that most people were fundamentally decent. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said to Patricia. "Has anything like this happened before? I mean, do other passengers get treated this way?" Patricia's expression grew troubled. "Not to my knowledge, no. In all my years of flying, I've never seen a crew member conduct an unauthorized search like that. It's simply not something we do. But I have to ask," Maya continued, her voice getting stronger as she spoke. "Do you think this would have happened if I were a white woman in first class?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Patricia looked uncomfortable, but to her credit, she didn't try to dodge it. "Honestly, I don't think it would have. And that makes this even more serious from the company's perspective." Dorothy nodded approvingly at Patricia's candor. "At least you're being honest about it. Too many people want to pretend these things happen in a vacuum." Maya saved her notes and looked around at the group that had formed around her. "You know, this isn't my first experience with this kind of thing. Usually it's more subtle. A hotel clerk who asks to see my credit card 3 times. A restaurant host who keeps insisting I'd be more comfortable at a different table. Store security following me around even though I'm clearly shopping. How do you handle it?" asked the teenager, whose name turned out to be Austin. Maya smiled for the first time since the ordeal began. "You learn to pick your battles. You develop thick skin, and you make sure you're so good at what you do that people can't dismiss your accomplishments." "What do you do?" Lisa asked. "I'm a senior marketing director for Thompson Creative in Atlanta. Tomorrow I'm giving the opening keynote at the Digital Marketing Excellence Conference in Los Angeles. It's about reaching diverse consumer markets through authentic messaging. Richard whistled softly. Thompson Creative? I know that firm. They're one of the biggest marketing companies in the Southeast. 10 years I've worked there, Maya said with pride. Started as an assistant account coordinator making $28,000 a year. Now I manage campaigns for Fortune 500 companies. Dorothy beamed at her. And here's this flight attendant treating you like you don't belong in first class, when you've probably worked harder than half the people on this plane. The irony, Maya said with a bitter laugh, is that I almost didn't buy the first-class ticket. It's expensive, and even though I can afford it now, I still sometimes feel guilty spending that much money on myself. Don't you ever feel guilty about that again, Lisa said firmly. You earned your success, you can afford the ticket, and you deserve to be treated with respect regardless of where you sit. Austin, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Can I say something? I'm just a high school kid, so maybe this doesn't mean much, but watching all this happen made me really think about stuff. Like I never realized how different things might be for other people. Maya looked at him with genuine appreciation. That actually means a lot, Austin. The fact that you noticed and cared enough to speak up says something good about you. Patricia had been listening to the conversation while periodically checking on other passengers. Now she returned to Maya's seat with an update. I've spoken with the captain and we're going to file a formal incident report as soon as we land. The crew member involved has been removed from passenger service duties for the remainder of the flight. What does that mean exactly? Dorothy asked. She's confined to the galley and won't be interacting with passengers. Also, there will be a full investigation when we reach Los Angeles and likely immediate suspension pending a complete review. Maya nodded, then looked directly at Patricia. I appreciate that, but can I ask you to make sure something else happens? Of course, what? Make sure this becomes a learning opportunity. Not just punishment, but education. Because I don't think that woman woke up this morning planning to humiliate a pregnant passenger. I think she has some biases she probably doesn't even realize she has. The group around Maya looked at her with something approaching awe. Here she was, having just been publicly humiliated and harassed, and she was thinking about how to prevent it from happening to someone else. You're a better person than I am, Richard said. I'd be looking for ways to sue them into bankruptcy. Oh, don't get me wrong, Maya said with a smile that had some steel in it. I'm definitely going to file complaints and make sure this gets the attention it deserves. But I also think real change comes from education, not just punishment. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. You know, I've handled a lot of discrimination cases, and the plaintiffs who focus on systemic change rather than just personal revenge usually get better results. Plus, Maya added, I have a keynote speech to give tomorrow about reaching diverse markets. This experience actually gave me some new material about why authentic inclusion matters so much. Dorothy laughed. You're going to turn this horrible experience into professional advantage? I like you, Maya Johnson. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, Maya realized something had shifted in her feelings about the incident. She was still angry and hurt, but she also felt empowered. She had handled herself with dignity under pressure. She had discovered that strangers would stand up for what's right, and she had an opportunity to make sure something positive came from something negative. You know what the best part of this is going to be? Maya said as she packed up her notes. What's that? Austin asked. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to stand up in front of 300 marketing executives and tell them exactly why authentic diversity and inclusion initiatives matter so much to business success. And I'm going to have a very recent, very personal example to share. Patricia returned with Maya's meal, properly plated and with an apologetic note from the galley crew. I know this doesn't make up for what happened, but we wanted you to have your lunch. Maya accepted the plate graciously. Thank you. And Patricia, make sure your company knows that how you handled this situation after it happened made a difference. You can't control every employee's behavior, but you can control how you respond when things go wrong. As Maya finally ate her salmon, which was actually quite good, she thought about her husband David waiting for her in Los Angeles. She'd have to tell him what happened and he'd be furious, but she'd also be able to tell him about Dorothy and Richard and Lisa and Austin, and all the other passengers who had refused to just sit there and watch injustice happen. The plane touched down in Los Angeles right on time, and as the passengers began gathering their belongings, Maya found herself surrounded by well-wishers and people offering final words of support. You handled that with such grace, Dorothy said, giving Maya a gentle hug. Your parents raised you right. Thank you for standing up for me, Maya replied. I'll never forget that. As they prepared to leave the plane, Maya realized she felt stronger than when she'd boarded in Atlanta. Yes, she'd experienced something awful, but she'd also experienced something beautiful. The way strangers could come together to support what's right. Tomorrow's speech was going to be very different from what she'd originally planned. And somehow she thought it was going to be much better. Maya was one of the last passengers to leave the plane. Having spent extra time exchanging contact information with Dorothy, Richard, Lisa, and several other witnesses, Patricia had walked her to the gate personally, apologizing once more and promising that the company would follow up within 24 hours. As Maya emerged from the jetway into the busy Los Angeles terminal, she immediately spotted David waiting for her. Even from a distance, she could see he was checking his watch and scanning the crowd with that slightly anxious expression he got when her flights were delayed or when he worried about her traveling while pregnant. The moment he saw her face, his expression changed completely. What happened? David asked, immediately moving to take her carry-on bag and support her elbow. After 8 years of marriage, he could read her moods like a book, and something was clearly wrong. Can we sit down for a minute? Maya asked, gesturing toward a quiet seating area near the gate. I need to tell you about the flight. David's concern deepened as they found seats away from the main flow of passenger traffic. Maya took a deep breath and began recounting the events of the past 3 hours, starting with Rebecca's suspicious behavior during boarding, and ending with the public pat-down that had humiliated her in front of the entire first-class cabin. As Maya spoke, David's expression grew darker and darker. His jaw tightened when she described the unnecessary ID checks. His hands clenched when she talked about the inappropriate touching. And by the time she finished, he looked ready to march back onto that plane and have some very strong words with Rebecca. Are you kidding me? David said, his voice tight with controlled anger. They searched you? A pregnant woman? For what possible reason? That's what everyone was asking, Maya replied. The other passengers were amazing, David. This retired judge named Dorothy stood right up and told the flight attendant she was witnessing harassment. And this businessman, Richard, recorded the whole thing. As if summoned by her words, Dorothy appeared beside them, having overheard Maya mention her name. Maya, dear, Dorothy said warmly, I wanted to check on you before I left for my connection. She turned to David with a smile. You must be the husband. I'm Dorothy Patterson. David stood to shake her hand, his manners never failing even when he was furious. David Johnson, thank you so much for standing up for my wife. Any decent person would have done the same thing, Dorothy replied, though they all knew that wasn't necessarily true. What your wife experienced was completely unacceptable, and I want you to know I'll be filing my own complaint with the airline. Richard appeared a moment later, having delayed his own departure to make sure Maya was okay. Ms. Johnson, I wanted to give you this, he said, handing her a USB drive. It has the video I took plus my written account of what I witnessed. You'll want to have that for your complaint. David's eyebrows rose. You recorded it? Every second of the search, Richard confirmed. And I have to tell you, in 20 years of business travel, I've never seen anything so blatantly inappropriate. Your wife handled it with incredible dignity. As Richard and Dorothy shared their contact information with David and reiterated their willingness to serve as witnesses, Maya found herself studying her husband's reactions. She'd expected him to be angry, but there was something else in his expression, something that looked almost like guilt. David, Maya said after Richard and Dorothy had left to catch their connections, are you okay? You look like there's something else bothering you. David was quiet for a long moment, staring at the USB drive Richard had given them. When he finally looked up at Maya, his expression was pained. I should have been on that flight with you, he said. If I'd been there, none of this would have happened. Maya took his hand. You couldn't help it. Your meeting ran late. These things happen. No, Maya, you don't understand. David's voice was strained. It wouldn't have happened if I'd been there because of who I am. Maya looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? David stood up and began pacing in front of their chairs, running his hands through his hair in a gesture Maya recognized as his way of dealing with stress. The airline, he said finally. Skybridge Airlines. I know it very well. Know it how? Maya asked, though something in her stomach was beginning to twist with anticipation. David stopped pacing and looked directly at her. Maya, I own it. For a moment, Maya thought she'd misheard. You what?
Skybridge Airlines.
I'm the majority owner and CEO. Maya stared at her husband as if seeing him for the first time. Of course she knew David was successful. He ran a large company, they lived well, and he traveled frequently for business. But somehow, in 8 years of marriage, she'd never fully connected the dots. You own the airline, Maya repeated slowly. The airline where I was just humiliated and searched like a criminal. Maya, I had no idea anything like this was happening. If I'd known that any employee was treating passengers this way, especially treating you this way, David's voice trailed off as the full implications hit him. Maya felt a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Relief that her husband had the power to make sure this never happened again. Anger that it had happened in the first place on an airline he owned. And something else, something she couldn't quite name. How did I not know this? Maya asked. How did I not know my own husband owned an airline? David sat back down beside her. You knew I ran Johnson Aviation Holdings. I guess I never explained that Skybridge is our biggest subsidiary. Maya shook her head in amazement. Johnson Aviation Holdings, of course. I just thought it was some kind of consulting firm or something. Maya, I am so sorry this happened to you, and I'm especially sorry it happened on one of my planes by one of my employees. Maya was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. Finally, she looked at David with the expression he couldn't quite read. What are you going to do about it? She asked. Everything, David replied immediately. That flight attendant will be fired by tomorrow morning. We'll review our training procedures, implement new policies, and make sure nothing like this ever happens again. That's not what I meant, Maya said quietly. David looked confused. What did you mean? I mean, what are you going to do to make sure this doesn't happen to other people? People who don't happen to be married to the CEO? David was quiet, clearly not having considered the broader implications. Because here's the thing, David, Maya continued. What happened to me today wasn't about me personally. Rebecca didn't know who I was or who I was married to. She saw a pregnant black woman in first class and made assumptions. And if she's comfortable doing that to me, how many other passengers has she treated poorly? David's expression grew troubled as he realized Maya was right. You're saying this isn't an isolated incident. I'm saying I doubt it. And the fact that she felt comfortable conducting an illegal search in front of other passengers suggests she thought her behavior was acceptable, which means either your training is inadequate or your company culture has some serious problems. Maya pulled out her phone and showed David the detailed notes she'd taken during the flight. Look at this timeline. Multiple unnecessary ID checks, public announcements of my personal information, delayed service, and finally an invasive search with no justification. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was sustained harassment over a 3-hour period. David read through Maya's notes, his expression growing darker with each entry. This is systematic. This is deliberate targeting. Exactly. And David, I need you to promise me something. Anything. I need you to promise that your response to this won't just be about protecting me or making me feel better. I need you to promise that you'll use this as an opportunity to examine how your company treats all passengers, especially passengers who look like me. David took Maya's hands in his. I promise. And Maya, I need you to know that this goes against everything I thought I was building with this company. We have diversity training. We have non-discrimination policies. We have policies on paper, Maya interrupted gently. Aren't the same as culture and practice. David nodded slowly. You're right. And tomorrow morning I'm going to start figuring out how to fix this. Not just tomorrow morning, Maya said. Tonight. I want you to call whoever needs to be called and make sure Rebecca isn't working any more flights until this is resolved. Because if she treated me this way, she's probably treating other people this way too. David pulled out his phone immediately. You're absolutely right. I'm calling our head of operations right now. As David made his calls, Maya sat back and watched her husband transform from concerned spouse to corporate executive. She heard him speaking firmly to various company officials, demanding immediate action and full reports. While he was on the phone, Dorothy reappeared, having missed her connection due to weather delays. Maya.
How are you holding up, dear?
I'm okay, Dorothy. Actually, I just learned something interesting about my husband. Dorothy glanced at David, who was in heated conversation with someone about immediate suspension pending full investigation. He seems to be taking this very seriously, Dorothy observed. He should be, Maya said with a slight smile. It turns out he owns the airline. Dorothy's eyebrows shot up. Well, that's an interesting development. Indeed it is. As David finished his calls and rejoined them, Dorothy studied him with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent 30 years evaluating people in a courtroom. Mr. Johnson, she said, your wife experienced something no passenger should ever have to endure. But she also showed remarkable grace under pressure. I hope you're planning to do more than just discipline one employee. Much more, David replied seriously. This is going to be a complete review of our policies, our training, and our culture. Maya's made it clear that this isn't just about what happened to her personally. Dorothy nodded approvingly. Good. Because I've been flying for 60 years and I've seen how some people get treated differently. It's past time for companies to address these issues systematically. As they prepared to leave the airport, Maya realized that what had started as one of the worst travel experiences of her life might actually turn into something positive, not just for her but for all the passengers who might fly Skybridge Airlines in the future. But first, she had a keynote speech to give. And now she had an even more compelling story to tell about why diversity and inclusion weren't just nice ideas, but business necessities. 3 weeks after the incident, Rebecca Morrison sat in the conference room at Skybridge Airlines corporate headquarters, her palms sweating as she waited for what she assumed would be her termination meeting. She'd been on paid suspension since the day after the flight, and every day had been an exercise in anxiety and regret. The door opened, and Rebecca was surprised to see not just her supervisor, but David Johnson himself, along with Dr. Patricia Williams, the company's head of human resources, and someone she didn't recognize, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. Rebecca, David began, his tone serious but not hostile. I think you know why we're here today. Rebecca nodded, her voice barely a whisper. The incident on Flight 447, that's right. Before we begin, I want you to know that the passenger involved, Maya Johnson, is my wife. Rebecca's face went white. She'd spent 3 weeks wondering who she'd treated so poorly, but she'd never imagined this possibility. Mr. Johnson, I had no idea. I am so sorry. The fact that she's my wife isn't the issue, Rebecca, David continued. The issue is that you treated a passenger in a way that was completely unacceptable, and that treatment would have been wrong regardless of who she was or who she was married to. Dr. Williams leaned forward. Rebecca, we've completed our investigation. We've reviewed the video evidence, interviewed multiple witnesses, and examined your employment record. What we found concerns us deeply. Rebecca felt tears beginning to form. I know I made a mistake. I was having a bad day, and I guess Rebecca, the unknown woman spoke for the first time, her voice gentle but firm. My name is Dr. Jennifer Martinez, and I'm a consultant who specializes in unconscious bias training. Before we continue, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Do you remember what you were thinking when you first saw Maya board the plane? Rebecca shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I don't know what you mean. Think carefully, Dr. Martinez continued. What was your very first thought when you saw her boarding pass for first class? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with the question. Finally, she spoke in a voice so low they could barely hear her. I thought maybe there was a mistake, like maybe she was in the wrong section. And why did you think that? Another long pause. I guess because she was young and black, and I thought maybe she couldn't afford first class. The room fell silent as Rebecca's admission hung in the air. She looked up at the faces around the table, seeing not anger but something else, disappointment mixed with what looked like understanding. Rebecca, Dr. Martinez said, what you just described is called unconscious bias. It's when our brains make assumptions about people based on stereotypes we've absorbed from society, often without us even realizing it. But I'm not racist, Rebecca protested. I have black friends. I voted for Obama, David spoke up. Rebecca, no one is saying you woke up that morning planning to discriminate against someone, but your actions that day caused real harm to a passenger who had done nothing wrong except exist while black in first class. Dr. Williams opened a file. We've also discovered that this wasn't an isolated incident. In the past 2 years, we've had 3 other complaints about your treatment of passengers, all involving people of color. In each case, you found reasons to question their tickets, request additional identification, or provide substandard service. Rebecca's eyes widened. I never connected. I didn't think. That's exactly the problem, Dr. Martinez interjected. You didn't think. You acted on unconscious assumptions, and those actions had consequences for real people. David leaned back in his chair. Rebecca, we have a decision to make about your future with Skybridge Airlines. The easy thing would be to terminate your employment and move on. But Maya, my wife, made a specific request about how we handle this situation. Rebecca looked up hopefully. She asked us to use this as a learning opportunity, not just for you, but for our entire company. She believes that education is more powerful than punishment alone. Dr. Williams continued, Here's what we're prepared to offer you, Rebecca. You can choose immediate termination with a neutral reference, or you can choose to participate in our new comprehensive bias training program. What would that involve? Rebecca asked. Dr. Martinez smiled for the first time since entering the room. It would involve 6 months of intensive education about unconscious bias, cultural competency training, and sensitivity workshops. You'd attend seminars, complete online modules, and participate in group discussions with other employees. You'd also be required to write a detailed analysis of your actions that day and present it to our management team. Additionally, David added, you'd be assigned to work closely with our customer service team to review and improve our passenger interaction protocols. Essentially, you'd help us make sure no other passenger experiences what Maya did. Rebecca was quiet for several minutes, processing the offer. Finally, she looked up at David. Mr. Johnson, can I ask you something? Of course. Why would your wife want to help me? After what I did to her? David smiled for the first time during the meeting. Because she's a better person than most of us. She said that punishing you wouldn't prevent the next Rebecca from making the same mistakes, but educating you might help you become an advocate for better treatment of all passengers. There's one more component to this program, Dr. Martinez added. After you complete the training, you'd have the opportunity to participate in our new passenger advocacy initiative. You'd help train other flight attendants on recognizing and preventing discriminatory behavior. Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face. You mean you'd trust me to train other people? After what I did? People who have made mistakes and learned from them often make the best teachers, Dr. Williams explained. They understand both the harm that bias can cause and the work required to overcome it. I want to do the program, Rebecca said without hesitation. I want to learn. I want to make this right, David nodded. Good, but Rebecca, I need you to understand something. This isn't going to be easy. You're going to have to examine some uncomfortable truths about yourself and society. You're going to hear from people who've experienced discrimination, and some of their stories are going to be difficult to listen to. I understand, Rebecca replied. And Mr. Johnson? Please tell your wife that I am truly deeply sorry for what I put her through. I know saying sorry doesn't undo what happened, but I want her to know that I recognize how wrong I was. The meeting concluded with Rebecca signing up for the training program and agreeing to a probationary period during which her performance would be closely monitored. As everyone gathered their materials to leave, Dr. Martinez approached Rebecca. I want you to know that what you did today, admitting your bias and committing to change, was brave. A lot of people would have made excuses or blamed everyone else. 6 months later, Rebecca stood in front of a room full of Skybridge Airlines employees, delivering a presentation about unconscious bias and its impact on customer service. In the audience sat Maya Johnson, who had agreed to attend Rebecca's final training presentation. 6 months ago, Rebecca began, I humiliated a pregnant passenger on one of our flights. I searched her without cause, questioned her right to be in first class, and made her feel like a criminal for the crime of flying while black. She paused and looked directly at Maya. That passenger was Maya Johnson, and she's here today not because she had to be, but because she chose to be. She chose to see this as an opportunity for growth rather than just punishment. Rebecca's voice grew stronger as she continued. I learned that I had unconscious biases I didn't even know existed. I learned that good intentions don't excuse harmful actions. And I learned that real change requires not just admitting you were wrong, but doing the hard work to understand why you were wrong and how to be better. After the presentation, Maya approached Rebecca. They stood facing each other for a moment. two women whose lives had intersected in such an unfortunate way 6 months earlier. "Rebecca," Maya said finally, "I want you to know how proud I am of the work you've done these past 6 months." "Mrs. Johnson," Rebecca's voice broke slightly. "I still can't believe you advocated for me to keep my job." "I didn't do it for you," Maya replied gently. "I did it because I believe people can change, and because I believe that someone who has truly learned from their mistakes can help prevent others from making the same ones." Rebecca nodded. "I promise you I will never let another passenger experience what I put you through." "I believe you," Maya said. "And Rebecca, you don't have to carry the guilt forever. You made a mistake, you've learned from it, and now you're helping others learn too. That's how we make progress." 3 months after that conversation, Rebecca was promoted to Senior Customer Service Trainer, specializing in bias prevention and inclusive service excellence. The program she helped develop became a model that other airlines began adopting. Maya's keynote speech at the Digital Marketing Excellence Conference, which had incorporated her experience on the flight, was later published as an article about authentic inclusion in business. It won several industry awards and led to speaking engagements across the country. David Johnson restructured Skybridge Airlines' entire customer service approach, implementing regular bias training, diverse hiring practices, and a passenger advocate system that allowed travelers to report discrimination immediately and confidentially. Dorothy Patterson became a regular consultant for the airline's Passenger Rights Initiative, using her legal expertise to help develop policies that protected travelers from discrimination. Richard Chen, the businessman who had recorded the incident, became an unofficial ambassador for the airline's transformation, often sharing the story of how he watched a company turn a moment of failure into an opportunity for meaningful change. On a warm Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after the incident, Maya boarded another Skybridge Airlines flight to Los Angeles. She was 8 months pregnant with her second child, and once again flying first class for a business conference. The flight attendant who greeted her was a young man named Alex, and his smile was genuine and warm as he helped her settle into her seat. "Is this your first time flying with us, ma'am?" Alex asked as he adjusted her seatbelt. "No," Maya replied with a smile. "I'm actually quite familiar with this airline." "Wonderful. Please let me know if there's anything at all I can do to make your flight more comfortable." As the plane taxied for takeoff, Maya reflected on how much had changed in 1 year. The incident that had started as one of the worst experiences of her life had ultimately led to systemic changes that would benefit thousands of future passengers. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to David. "Great service on board today. Your team is doing good work." His response came quickly. "They learned from the best teacher. See you in LA." Maya settled back in her seat, hand resting on her belly, and smiled as she thought about the presentation she'd give tomorrow. It was about the power of turning difficult experiences into opportunities for growth. And she had the perfect story to illustrate the point. Sometimes, she reflected, the most uncomfortable moments in life become the catalysts for the most meaningful changes, not just for ourselves, but for everyone whose lives we touch along the way.